He fixed an elderly woman's car for free and got fired. Days later, he discovered who she really was. The alarm rang at 4:45 a.m., though Nicholas was already awake. Sleep had become a shallow thing, light, fragile, easily broken by the quiet hum of worry. He lay still for a moment, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling above his bed. The house was silent except for the soft, uneven rhythm of his mother's breathing in the next room. He listened for a few seconds longer, still steady. That was enough to get him up. The kitchen light flickered when he turned it on. He brewed the cheapest coffee he could find at the discount store and poured it into a chipped mug that had once belonged to his father. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, thin walls, aging pipes, but it was paid off. That was the one blessing. On the counter sat a neat stack of envelopes, medical bills, prescription receipts, a reminder notice from the pharmacy. Nicholas didn't open them. He already knew the numbers. Instead, he folded the reminder into his back pocket. He would figure something out. He always did. By 6 a.m., he was unlocking the side door of Carter's Auto Repair, the small-town shop where he had worked since he was 19. The smell of oil and metal greeted him like an old companion. He flipped on the fluorescent lights, rolled up the garage doors, and got to work before anyone else arrived. Nicholas liked the quiet before the day began. No engines roaring, no customers complaining, no boss watching, just him and the machines. He moved with quiet precision, checking inventory, organizing tools, finishing a brake job he had stayed late to complete the night before. His hands were steady, skilled, confident. By the time his boss, Mr. Carter, walked in at 8 sharp, Nicholas had already completed 2 inspections and prepared invoices. Mr. Carter was a man who measured everything in margins. "How many appointments today?" he asked without greeting. 7 confirmed. 2 walk-ins likely, Nicholas replied. "Make sure we don't undercharge. Parts cost more this quarter." Nicholas nodded. He had heard that speech before. Mr. Carter believed in profit first, loyalty second, and kindness somewhere far below both. Nicholas skipped lunch that day. He told the guys he wasn't hungry, but the truth was simple. Every saved dollar mattered. His mother's medication had increased again last month. The new dosage wasn't optional. Around 2:30 p.m., an older sedan pulled slowly into the lot. It was clean, carefully maintained, not flashy, not new, but respected. Like someone who took pride in what little they had. An elderly woman stepped out. Her grey hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head. She wore a modest blue coat, slightly worn at the sleeves. Her movements were slow but deliberate, and Nicholas wiped his hands and approached with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. What seems to be the problem?" She returned his smile gently. "There's a rattling sound under the hood. It started this morning." Her voice carried calm dignity. Nicholas listened carefully as she described the sound. No impatience, no dismissiveness. He opened the hood and inspected the engine. Loose alternator belt. Simple fix. He tightened it, checked for additional issues, and ran a quick systems check. Everything else looked solid. He could have added labor time, could have suggested unnecessary replacements, but he didn't. When he handed her the invoice, it was modest. "That's all?" she asked, studying the paper. "That's all it needed." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened her purse and froze. Her hands moved slowly through its contents. Then slower. "Oh my," she murmured. I must have left my wallet at home." The garage noise seemed to dull in Nicholas's ears. He felt the weight of the pharmacy reminder in his back pocket. Rent was due in 5 days. Mr. Carter was inside the office, glass window facing the garage floor, watching. The woman looked embarrassed. Genuinely so. "I can come back tomorrow," she said softly. "I live nearby." Nicholas hesitated. His mind moved quickly. If she didn't return, the cost would come from the register, and Mr. Carter would not tolerate that. But she looked at him with something more than embarrassment. She looked searching. "It's okay," Nicholas said finally. "Don't worry about it." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "It wasn't a major repair. Just drive safely." Silence lingered between them. Then she reached out and gently touched his arm. "Thank you," she said, and there was something unusually deliberate in her tone. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, measured. She walked back to her car, started the engine, and drove off slowly. Nicholas watched until she disappeared down the street. When he turned around, Mr. Carter was already standing there. "How much?" his boss asked flatly. Nicholas swallowed. "It was minor. I told her she could come back." "You what?" "She forgot her wallet. And you just let her leave." Nicholas felt the eyes of the other mechanics on him. "I made a judgment call." Mr. Carter's face hardened. "You don't get to make judgment calls with my money." "It was $25. "It's not about $25. Mr. Carter's voice rose, echoing off the concrete walls. "It's about principle. You let one person slide and word spreads. We're not a charity." Nicholas felt heat crawl up his neck. She seemed honest. Honest doesn't pay the electric bill. The other workers looked down, pretending to stay busy. Mr. Carter stepped closer. "You think you're some kind of hero? You want to hand out free service? Do it on your own time." Nicholas didn't respond. "Actually," Mr. Carter continued coldly, "you won't be doing it at all." The words landed like a wrench dropped on steel. "You're fired." The garage went completely still. Nicholas blinked once. "Sir, I need employees who understand business, not emotions. Clear out your toolbox." No shouting now, just finality. Nicholas felt something collapse quietly inside his chest. He walked to his station, removed his tools one by one, placing them into a worn metal box his father had given him years ago. Each clang felt heavier than the last. No one spoke. No one stopped him. When he stepped outside, the late afternoon sun felt harsher than usual. He carried the box all the way home. The walk seemed longer than ever before. Neighbors waved casually. He forced small nods in return. By the time he reached the front door, his arms ached, not from the weight of the tools, but from what they represented. Inside, the house was dim. His mother was sitting in her recliner, a blanket across her lap. She looked up as he entered. "You're home early," she said gently. Nicholas set the toolbox down quietly. "Yeah, slow day." She studied him carefully. A mother's intuition does not require explanation. He moved to the sink, washed his hands slowly. The grease came off in dark spirals under the running water. He stared at his reflection in the small kitchen window. Strong hands, capable hands, hands that could repair engines, rebuild transmissions, solve mechanical chaos. And yet, they hadn't been able to protect his job. His mother's voice came softly from behind him. "Nicholas, what happened?" He didn't turn around immediately. He simply looked down at his palms, the same hands that fix everything. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if they had just broken his future. The first morning without work felt wrong. Nicholas still woke at 4:45 a.m. His body hadn't gotten the message yet. For a few seconds, in that space between sleep and memory, everything felt normal. Then reality settled back in, slow, heavy, inescapable. He wasn't late. He had nowhere to be. He lay still, staring at the ceiling again, but this time the cracks seemed wider. In the next room, his mother coughed, a thin, fragile sound that lingered too long in the air. Nicholas sat up immediately. Routine didn't disappear just because employment did. He made coffee, measured her morning medication carefully, helped her sit upright when the dizziness hit. "You don't have to hover," she said softly, trying to smile. "I know." But he did, because hovering was the only thing he could still control. By mid-morning, Nicholas was out walking town streets with a folder tucked under his arm. Certifications, references, years of experience neatly documented. He visited 3 repair shops before noon. The first manager barely glanced at his resume. "Business is slow." The second was more direct. "Didn't you work for Carter?" "Yes." "Word is you gave away services for free." Nicholas felt the sting. It was one situation. The manager shrugged. "Margins are tight everywhere." At the third shop, the owner didn't even step out of his office. The message came through a teenage employee. "We're not hiring." By the end of the day, Nicholas understood something clearly. Mr. Carter hadn't just fired him. He had labeled him irresponsible, soft, bad for business. In a small town, reputation traveled faster than truth. The envelopes on the kitchen counter multiplied. Past due, second notice, final reminder. Nicholas sold his old guitar first, then a spare set of tools he had inherited from his father. Each transaction felt like erasing part of himself. His mother noticed. "You shouldn't be selling your things. It's temporary." She studied him carefully. "You did what you believed was right, didn't you?" Nicholas hesitated. For the first time since that afternoon, doubt slipped in without resistance. "I thought I did." At night, the silence grew heavier. He replayed the moment in his mind, the woman's eyes, her hand on his arm, the softness in her voice. Had he misread it? Had it all been manipulation? Maybe Mr. Carter was right. Maybe kindness was just another word for naive. On the third day, his mother's condition worsened. The new prescription wasn't optional anymore. The pharmacist had been patient, but patients didn't refill bottles. Nicholas stood at the pharmacy counter, calculating in his head. He didn't have enough. "I can put half down," he said quietly. The pharmacist gave him a look that mixed sympathy with policy. "I'll hold it until tomorrow." Tomorrow. Nicholas stepped outside and felt something unfamiliar pressing against his chest. Not fear, not anger, helplessness. That evening, as he sat at the small kitchen table reviewing numbers that refused to cooperate, the phone rang. They rarely received calls anymore. Nicholas answered cautiously. "Hello? May I speak with Nicholas Reed?" His spine straightened slightly. "This is he." "My name is Sandra. I'm calling regarding a private employment opportunity. Your name was recommended to us. We would like you to attend an interview tomorrow at 10 a.m. Nicholas frowned. "I think you may have the wrong person. The address will be sent to your phone. Please confirm your attendance." The line went dead before he could respond. He stared at the receiver. Private employment opportunity. Recommended by whom? Within seconds, a text message arrived, an address. Nicholas recognized the street immediately. It wasn't just in the wealthier part of town. It was the wealthiest. Glass buildings, corporate headquarters, places that didn't advertise open mechanic positions. He almost deleted the message. It had to be a mistake. But something held him back. Hope is stubborn, even when pride isn't. The next morning, he stood outside the building 15 minutes early. He nearly turned around twice. The structure towered above him. Sleek glass, polished stone, quiet authority. He checked the address again. This was it. Inside, the lobby smelled like expensive air conditioning and polished floors. Everything gleamed. The receptionist looked up as he approached. "You must be Mr. Reed." Nicholas blinked. "Yes. We've been expecting you." She didn't ask for identification, didn't hesitate. She already knew. "Please take the elevator to the 14th floor. Someone will meet you." Nicholas stepped into the elevator alone. As the doors closed, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. Pressed shirt, worn shoes, calloused hands. He suddenly felt very aware of the grease that no amount of scrubbing ever fully removed from beneath his nails. The elevator chimed. The doors opened to a quiet hallway lined with frosted glass offices. A man in a tailored suit approached him. "This way, Mr. Reed." No explanation, just direction. Nicholas followed. At the end of the hallway stood double wooden doors, polished, imposing. The suited man pushed them open. Nicholas stepped inside. The room was expansive, dominated by a long mahogany conference table. Sunlight streamed through massive windows overlooking the city. Seated around the table were several sharply dressed individuals, legal pads open, tablets glowing, expressions unreadable. And at the head of the table, the elderly woman. But she was not dressed in a modest blue coat. She wore a tailored charcoal suit. Her posture was straight, commanding. Her presence filled the room with quiet authority. Her eyes met his, the same eyes. Only now they were unmistakably powerful. "Good morning, Nicholas," she said calmly. His mouth went dry. "You—" A faint smile curved her lips. "Yes, we've met." The room was silent except for the soft hum of the building. She gestured to the empty chair halfway down the table. "Please sit." Nicholas obeyed, confusion and disbelief colliding in his chest. "My name," she continued evenly, "is Eleanor Brooks." The name meant nothing at first. Then one of the advisors slid a folder across the table toward him. Inside were documents, company profiles, photographs of multiple automotive facilities across the state. Logos he recognized, chains he had seen advertised on billboards. Eleanor Brooks was listed as founder and majority owner. Nicholas looked up slowly. "You own all of this?" "Yes." The word was simple, certain. "I don't understand." "You showed me something rare," she said. "You chose integrity when it cost you something." Nicholas felt heat rise to his face. "You tested me." "I evaluated you," she corrected gently. A pause. "I have spent years searching for someone to manage a new venture. Someone who values people over margins. Someone who cannot be bought by convenience." Nicholas's heart pounded in his ears. "You let me lose my job." Her expression did not change. "I observed your employer's response. That was part of the evaluation." Anger flickered briefly inside him. "And if I had charged you?" She held his gaze. "You wouldn't be here." Silence filled the room. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. "I am expanding into independent community-based automotive service centers, transparent pricing, ethical practice, fair wages." She leaned forward slightly. "I need someone to lead the first location." Nicholas struggled to breathe evenly. "Why me?" "Because when you thought no one important was watching, you still did the right thing." The words landed heavier than any accusation ever had. She turned her head slightly toward the window. "Open it." An assistant pressed a remote. The massive blinds began to rise. Nicholas stood slowly, drawn forward by something he couldn't yet name. Across the street, sunlight reflected off polished metal and glass. A brand new auto facility stood there. Modern bays, pristine signage mounts, untouched pavement. A large sign hung at the front, covered by a dark curtain. Eleanor's voice was calm behind him. "This building is ready. Staff selected, equipment installed." Nicholas swallowed. "For who?" The curtain began to descend, slowly, deliberately, and though the letters were still hidden, the size of the sign left no doubt. It was large enough for a name. When the curtain finally dropped, the letters beneath it gleamed in the sunlight. "Reed Automotive." Nicholas didn't speak. He couldn't. The name looked unreal, too large, too polished, too permanent. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass doors beneath it. Behind him, Eleanor Brooks rose from her chair. "The property deed is prepared," she said calmly. "Ownership transfers upon your acceptance. No loans, no hidden clauses. You will operate independently, under my corporate umbrella only for supply chain support." Nicholas turned slowly. "This doesn't feel real." "It will," she replied, "especially when the responsibility settles in." Responsibility. That word felt more intimidating than opportunity. The first week moved like a dream he was afraid to wake from. Paperwork, legal briefings, bank introductions, vendor meetings. Nicholas signed documents with hands that had once tightened engine bolts for hourly wages. Now those same hands authorized payroll. The staff had already been shortlisted, 3 mechanics, 1 service advisor, 1 front desk receptionist. Eleanor insisted Nicholas conduct the final interviews himself. "Leadership begins with who you choose to trust," she told him. The first mechanic, Daniel, had 15 years of experience and 2 kids in middle school. "I just want somewhere stable," Daniel admitted. Nicholas remembered how instability felt. "You'll have it," he said. He offered fair wages, slightly above town average. Word spread quickly. Reed Automotive opened on a bright Monday morning. Nicholas stood in the center bay before sunrise, staring at the untouched equipment. The shop smelled new, metal, rubber, fresh paint. For a moment, doubt crept in quietly. Who am I to run this? He had never owned anything larger than a toolbox. Now an entire facility carried his name. Eleanor noticed his hesitation during her first walkthrough. "You look like a man waiting to be exposed," she observed gently. Nicholas gave a faint smile. "I keep expecting someone to realize I don't belong here." She studied him carefully. "Belonging is not granted by wealth," she said. "It is earned by integrity. You've already done that." Her words didn't erase the doubt, but they steadied it. The first customer arrived 20 minutes after opening. A young mother with a minivan and a nervous expression. "I just need someone honest," she said quietly. Nicholas felt something settle inside him. "You found the right place." He inspected the vehicle personally, explained every issue clearly, showed her the worn brake pads instead of just listing them on paper. The invoice was transparent, no hidden fees, no inflated labor hours. She left smiling. 2 days later, she returned, not with a complaint, but with her sister's car. Reputation began to grow, not through advertising, but through conversations in grocery store aisles and church parking lots. They actually explain things. They don't talk down to you. They don't overcharge. Within a month, appointments were booked a week in advance. Nicholas didn't inflate prices even when demand increased. Mr. Carter would have. But Nicholas remembered how it felt to stand on the other side of a counter. At home, life changed quietly. He paid the pharmacy in full. Upgraded his mother's care to a specialist in the city. For the first time in months, her prescriptions were filled before they ran out. "You don't have to work so hard anymore," she told him one evening, watching him review invoices at the kitchen table. "I want to," he replied. But the truth was deeper than that. He needed to prove to himself that he deserved this. The town began to talk. Local business owners noticed the new shop's rapid rise. Some admired it, some resented it. And eventually one particular visitor walked through the glass doors. Mr. Carter. The bell above the entrance chimed softly. Nicholas looked up from the front desk. Their eyes met across the lobby. Mr. Carter's posture was less rigid than Nicholas remembered. His suit looked slightly worn. His expression carried something unfamiliar. Restraint. "I was in the area," Mr. Carter said, glancing around at the spotless floor and state-of-the-art lifts. "Impressive place." "Thank you." Silence stretched between them. Daniel, sensing tension, retreated quietly into the garage. Mr. Carter cleared his throat. "Business seems strong. We're steady." Another pause. "I may have misjudged you," Mr. Carter said carefully. Nicholas didn't react immediately. The older man shifted his weight. "Some of my regular clients, they've migrated here." There it was. Not apology, not quite, but acknowledgement. Mr. Carter's eyes flicked toward the service bays. "You've built something good. With help," Nicholas said. Mr. Carter hesitated. "If you ever consider expanding or need additional oversight, I have experience." The offer was subtle, so was the request behind it. Nicholas saw it clearly, pride bending just enough to survive. He could have enjoyed this moment, could have reminded him of that afternoon in the garage, could have let silence sting. Instead, he chose something else. "I appreciate that," Nicholas said evenly. "Right now, we're focused on building carefully, but I wish you well." It wasn't revenge. It was dignity. Mr. Carter nodded slowly. As he walked toward the door, he paused. "You were never irresponsible," he said quietly. Then he left. Nicholas stood still for a moment, feeling something unexpected. Closure. That evening, Nicholas visited Eleanor at her home, a large but tastefully understated estate on the edge of town. He brought fresh bread from the bakery she liked. She insisted he join her for dinner. The dining room was warm, lined with old photographs and shelves of books rather than trophies or awards. "You handled Carter well," she said without looking up from her tea. "You heard about that?" "I hear many things." Nicholas smiled faintly. "I thought I'd feel more satisfied." "And?" "I didn't." Eleanor nodded. "Vindication is loud. Growth is quiet." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then she set her fork down. "I never had children," she said suddenly. Nicholas looked up. "I assumed business left room for nothing else," she continued, "and by the time I realized the cost, it was late." Her voice did not tremble, but something beneath it shifted. "That's why you tested people?" Nicholas asked gently. "I was searching," she admitted. "Not for an employee, for someone who valued what I value." She met his eyes directly. "You gave without knowing who I was. No ambition attached. No advantage expected." Nicholas felt a quiet weight in his chest. "I just thought it was the right thing." "That," she said softly, "is exactly why it mattered." After that night, their meetings became weekly, Sunday dinners, conversations about business ethics, about loss, about legacy. She shared stories of early failures and betrayals. He shared memories of his father teaching him how to rebuild a carburetor at age 12. The relationship shifted gradually, not defined, not announced, just felt. When Nicholas's mother had a difficult week, Eleanor sent a private nurse without fanfare. When Eleanor seemed tired, Nicholas adjusted his schedule to check on her personally. It was no longer mentorship, it was something closer to family. One evening, months later, they sat across from each other at her dining table. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows. Nicholas had just described plans to open a small scholarship fund for trade school students. Eleanor smiled, pride evident in her eyes. "You're building more than a business," she said. He laughed lightly. "You started this." "I opened a door," she corrected. "You walked through it." She reached for her glass of water. Her hand trembled slightly. Nicholas noticed. "You okay?" She nodded faintly. But as she tried to stand, her chair scraped sharply against the floor. Her expression shifted. Confusion first, then pain. "Nicholas!" The word barely formed before her knees buckled. He moved instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. "Eleanor!" Her body felt suddenly fragile in his arms, too light, too still. The room, moments ago warm and steady, seemed to tilt violently. "Nicholas," she whispered, her voice distant. And then her eyes closed. The hospital room was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Machines hummed softly. Monitors blinked in steady rhythm. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, sterile and uninviting. Eleanor Brooks looked smaller in the narrow hospital bed. The sharp suits were gone, replaced by pale cotton and thin blankets. Her silver hair rested loosely against the pillow. The strength that once commanded boardrooms now seemed concentrated entirely in her eyes. Nicholas sat beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. He hadn't left in 2 days. Doctors spoke in careful tones. Cardiac complications, underlying conditions, stress accumulation over time. Words that explained everything and nothing at once. "She needs rest," they had said, but rest felt too close to something else. Eleanor stirred slightly and opened her eyes. "You're still here," she murmured. Nicholas gave a small smile. "You'd do the same." A faint breath of amusement escaped her. "Of course I would." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy with unspoken understanding. After a moment, she spoke again. "I built everything to avoid being powerless," she said quietly. "Money, influence, control." Her gaze shifted toward the window, where the late afternoon light filtered through partially drawn blinds. "But power is a poor substitute for connection." Nicholas listened carefully. "When I was young," she continued, "I believed success required sacrifice, family, time, trust. I told myself I would make room for those things later." She looked back at him. "Later doesn't always come." He swallowed, the weight of her words pressing deep. "Why did you really test people?" he asked gently. She studied him as if measuring whether he was ready for the truth. "Because I didn't trust easily," she admitted. "Too many partnerships built on charm and broken promises. Too many smiles attached to ambition." Her voice softened. I wanted to find someone who would act with integrity when there was nothing to gain. She reached for his hand, her grip weaker now but deliberate. You were the first person who helped me without knowing who I was. The memory flashed between them, the garage, the modest coat, the forgotten wallet. I wasn't thinking about gain, Nicholas said quietly. That's why it mattered. Her fingers tightened slightly. I have updated the legal structure, she continued. The community automotive division is entirely yours now, not just the first location, all future expansions, full ownership. Nicholas shook his head instinctively. Eleanor, you don't need to. I do. Her tone, though gentle, carried familiar authority. This is not charity, it is succession. A tear slipped down his cheek before he realized it. I didn't stay because of the business, he said. I know, she whispered. That was the point. The following weeks were slower, harder. Eleanor was discharged home under private medical supervision, but her strength continued to fade. Nicholas rearranged his schedule entirely. Daniel handled most day-to-day operations at the shop. The business ran smoothly, proof that Nicholas had built something sustainable, but his priority had shifted. He sat beside Eleanor during quiet mornings, reading financial reports aloud when she asked, or simply recounting small stories from the shop. She cried when she saw the invoice, he told her one afternoon, said no one had ever explained repairs to her before. Eleanor smiled faintly. You're changing more than engines. Outside her bedroom window, autumn leaves began to fall. Time moved forward whether they invited it or not. One evening, as golden light spilled across the room, Eleanor motioned for him to come closer. I was afraid of dying alone, she confessed softly. Not of death itself, just of emptiness. You're not alone, Nicholas said firmly. No, she agreed. I'm not. Her breathing grew shallower. You gave me something I couldn't purchase, she said. Peace. Nicholas pressed her hand gently against his forehead. You gave me a future. A quiet smile touched her lips. That was always yours. Her eyes remained on him, steady, present, grateful. And then, without struggle, without fear, they slowly closed. The room did not change immediately. The machines continued their steady hum. But Nicholas felt the shift, the stillness, the finality. He remained there long after the doctors entered, not because he didn't understand, but because love does not leave when breath does. Grief did not arrive as an explosion. It came as waves. Quiet moments in the office when he instinctively reached for the phone to call her. Empty chairs at Sunday dinners. Silence where mentorship once lived. But beneath the grief was something steady. Purpose. Months passed, then a year. Reed Automotive expanded to 3 locations across neighboring counties. Each shop followed the same principles: transparent pricing, fair wages, community involvement. Nicholas personally reviewed every manager hire. Integrity first, skill second. He created a small plaque that hung in every lobby. Character is the foundation of every repair. His mother's health stabilized under better treatment. She walked more, smiled more. Pride filled her eyes when she saw the business's growth. You built this, she told him one afternoon. No, he replied softly. It was built on something bigger. He established the Eleanor Brooks Community Care Program the following spring. The initiative offered free or reduced cost repairs for families facing verified hardship, single parents, elderly residents on fixed incomes, veterans struggling between paychecks. Applications were reviewed discreetly, no public announcements, no marketing advantage, just quiet service. On the first day of the program, Nicholas personally handled the initial repair. A rusted pickup truck belonging to a retired factory worker. When the man tried to protest the waived fee, Nicholas simply said, "Someone once did the same for me." Word spread. But this time, it wasn't about profit. It was about trust. One afternoon, as Nicholas walked through the original shop, he noticed a familiar figure across the street. Mr. Carter. His old shop sign had faded. Business had slowed. Eventually, he sold the property and now worked part-time at a regional chain outside town. Their eyes met briefly through the window. Mr. Carter gave a small nod. Nicholas returned it. There was no bitterness left, only lessons. Late one rainy evening, a minivan pulled into the service bay just before closing. A young woman stepped out, her shoulders tense, a toddler asleep in the back seat. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "My check engine light came on and I can't risk driving like this. I don't get paid until Friday." Nicholas ran diagnostics himself. Minor sensor malfunction. Simple fix. He printed the invoice and handed it to her. She opened her purse, then froze. Her face paled. I left my wallet at home." The words hung in the air. For a split second, the memory surged back. Another garage, another woman, another choice. The rain tapped softly against the metal roof. The young mother looked mortified. "I can come back tomorrow, I promise." Nicholas looked at her child sleeping peacefully in the back seat. He smiled gently. "You can pay me another time." Her shoulders sagged with relief. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." As she drove away, Nicholas stood beneath the awning, watching the taillights fade into the night. He didn't think about loss. He didn't think about risk. He thought about legacy. True wealth had never been the building, or the accounts, or the expansion plans. It had always been the choice. The quiet decision made when no advantage was visible. What you give without expectation has a way of returning. Not always as money, not always as success, but as something far more enduring. Character. And in the end, that was the only inheritance that truly mattered.